I just work so much these days that, and sometimes you sit back and you wonder what you're doing it for. Because I've never been a one to look for fame or adulation amongst people. Maybe that's why my work can sometimes come across as aggressive or violent, because today maybe the world to me is a bit violent.
One only needed to look at the nature of Alexander McQueen's work, the inherent violence and melancholy in every piece, to see there was a deep and permeable wound at the core of this young designer. He put everything into his work, including, it said, his dreams, nightmares and fears. The renegade of British fashion, the late, great Alexander McQueen, was more than a designer. He was and still remains a major figure in British culture, redefining the rulebook with his youthful succession and a body of work that were more avant-garde forms of art than works of fashion. McQueen defied his East End beginnings, rising to the annals of fashion history by taking his place at the head of Givenchy at just 27 years of age. For years to come, his string of groundbreaking shows for both the French powerhouse and his eponymous label revealed the relentlessness of his imagination and an undeniable talent that took critics by surprise. From his first collection, paid for in dole money, all the way to his multi-million-dollar empire, it was clear people were interested in whatever he was selling, even if it was, at times, controversial. In February of 2010, the rebel designer would shock the world one final time, ending his long-standing battle with depression.
Brilliant and controversial British fashion designer Alexander McQueen was found dead in his London home Thursday after anguished internet postings that revealed his deep sorrow at the death of his mother. He was 40 years old. Police said his death was not being treated as suspicious. McQueen's representatives would not confirm British media reports that he had committed suicide.
Millions mourned the loss of his genius, while those closest to him recalled the humble man behind the curtain. Lee Alexander McQueen was born on the 17th of March 1969 into the working-class suburb of Lewisham in London. The youngest of 6 children, McQueen tapped into his creative side at an early age. With the encouragement of his mother, he began designing dresses for his 3 sisters.
When Lee was 17, he said, "I'll make you a couple of skirts." And I've got to say, they fit like a glove. They were so fitted to my body. I couldn't even move my legs hardly. But I used to get compliments on this skirt.
Despite his flourishing creative interior, there was a darkness that Lee would endure throughout his life. At the age of 6, he began to grapple with his homosexuality, but fully embraced it into adulthood.
And it's all part of growing up. It's all about sexuality. It's all about puberty. It's all about becoming an adult. And you have to go through these things. Yes, I'm 27 years old, but do you know what I mean? I've been on London's gay scene since I was 15. I've seen it, done it, and bought the T-shirt. So, like...
At the age of 9, he became a victim of sexual abuse at the hands of a non-blood relative and witnessed first-hand physical violence against women.
We were just in our flat. It was literally just in the middle of the evening. He said, "Oh, by the way, I was abused when I was a child by my brother-in-law." It just came out, and he started crying, and we started talking, and then almost as soon as he'd started telling me all of that, he said, "Oh, anyway, I don't want to talk about that anymore."
The stuff that he saw, I mean, the violence against my mum, the abuse he suffered by my dad, and the abuse my mum suffered by her dad, they had that affinity together, you know, they shared that, Lee and my mum. They were both affected by the same person.
McQueen's early collections, like Highland Rape, delved into the dark territories of violence and sadness, particularly against women, shocking viewers and attracting much criticism. In the 90s, his name was hard to avoid, the subject of tabloid headlines and underground chatter for his compelling and brazen antics.
Well, my career started off in Savile Row in a tailoring company called Anderson & Shepherd.
You would design the suits for them?
No, just make them. I was just a
them.
bespoke tailor.
Right.
And I was there for 3 years. Then I went to work into the theatre and film industry, doing the costumes for films. And then worked for a designer called Koji Tetsuno. And then I left England at 20 and went to work for Romeo Gigli in Milan. And then I came back and did a master's degree at St Martin's School of Art in fashion. And then after that, sort of started doing my own collections, and that was about 4 years ago.
Women's wear?
Women's wear, yeah.
McQueen's debut collection in 1992 was bought out in its entirety by none other than Isabella Blow, the then editor of British Vogue and one of the most ostentatious characters in an industry spilling with the eccentric. For McQueen, she represented the powerful and successful women he wanted to dress.
I really care about a woman's independence, and I like her when she walks into the room. I don't like her to look so naive and so fragile. I like her to look more stronger, that if a man goes up to her, he's got to have real balls to go up to her. I don't like her to look like she could be taken advantage of.
Yeah, she's not going to be easily swayed.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, she's going to stand up.
Yeah.
And in McQueen, Isabella found a kindred spirit, one whose talent for design was perfectly complemented by a sense of promotion and a keen eye for style. Her love of design extended to unearthing new talent, catapulting the career of McQueen alongside other contemporaries, from milliner Philip Treacy to model Sophie Dahl. Generating a close relationship, the two would go on to become an inseparable artist and muse combination of the high fashion industry, only to be destroyed by it from within. Ahead of his time, McQueen controversially was seen to be gaslighting the industry with his inclusion of non-models onto the runway, from the pregnant to the disabled, showing progressive racial inclusion and even featuring his own patron and muse, Isabella Blow. Blow stole the show in McQueen's 1994 autumn-winter catwalk, dubbed Banshee. He also dedicated his 1996 collection, Dante, to her. Designed as a commentary on war and religion,
The question was about war and peace through the Middle Ages. Is just, I find that religion is the cause of mostly all the wars in the world.
the collection showcased models who strutted down a crucifix catwalk to the sounds of organs clashing with club music and repeated gunfire, with the familiar sounds of missiles sporadically whirring overhead. There were new elements to the McQueen's aesthetic that took critics by surprise: maturity, romanticism, elegance. By 1997, he'd even designed tour costumes for the great David Bowie, immortalized in music history on the cover of Bowie's 20th studio album, Earthling. At the age of 27, and only 8 collections to his name, to the surprise of almost everyone, Alexander McQueen would become the head steward for Givenchy.
Were they surprised that you were chosen, even though you...
I think they put most people in a coma.
It's just, it was bigger than surprise.
Yeah,
They would say
shock, major shock.
Criticised for seemingly being dangerously underqualified to take on such a legacy, McQueen referred to the founder of the label as irrelevant.
I mean, I was 26 when I went to Paris, and I'd only been out of college like 2 years, and I know I was the head of French couture house, and it was like thrown to the lions.
Despite his rocky start, he still managed to create some of the most memorable runway moments in fashion history. Number 13 was one of McQueen's most revered forms of art. Model Shalom Harlow was the centerpiece, adorned in a pristine white dress in the middle of a circular platform. The platform began to spin, and 2 autonomous robot arms whirred to life beside her, casting both dress and model with dual streams of black and yellow paint, completely indiscriminate in their patterning. It was a conscious provocation of the nature and impact of technology in modern life. McQueen always sought to push the boundaries conceptually, to shake things up and open people to new ways of thinking. At the end of the year 2000, the Gucci Group, under the direction of Tom Ford, purchased a majority share in McQueen's own label, leaving him in charge as creative director, free and cashed up to redress the personal vision for the McQueen label. Voss was McQueen's crowning achievement in 2001. The audience was seated around an enormous reflective plastic box in the center of the room. Models staggered through the space, swathed in razor clamshells, flourishing red gowns built of ostrich feathers and costumes draped with taxidermy birds. One by one, the models threw themselves up against the walls and imitating the blood-curdling screams of the insane. New York Times writer Kathy Horan described McQueen as a great designer who is not only making beautiful clothes, but also responding like an artist to the horror and insanity in contemporary culture. In October 2009, McQueen presented his final and most impactful runway to date, entitled Plato's Atlantis. The spring 2010 collection was otherworldly, and most notably famous for its armadillo-esque shoes, worn by the then up-and-coming pop sensation Lady Gaga in her hit music video Bad Influence. The show broke new ground by being the first live-streamed runway facilitated by On Show Studio, who had preferenced McQueen over any other designer to debut the technology. It nearly broke the internet, with the help of Lady Gaga's own followers open to the collaboration, and McQueen secured an unprecedented audience for his work. The move birthed a new digital era for commercial fashion and provided McQueen with a new platform for his art. With success impressed upon him at an early age, McQueen was repeatedly torn open with every criticism sustained, and every looming deadline in which he was forced again and again to justify his undeniable talent. But with each new collection, he placed himself under greater pressure to outdo his last.
When did it become bad? Well, it became bad when the pressure became too much for him, and he obviously started dealing with it in ways he shouldn't have, unfortunately.
And with it came an aggressiveness, a kind of anger, a sort of paranoia.
As his constitution declined and he was diagnosed with HIV, he increasingly turned to cocaine for support.
And the more money he had, he seemed to be more unhappy.
Because with the money came drugs, and that was a sad thing.
Okay. It made me look at things in a really clear light and an honest light when I was going through it all, to tell yourself, this is too much work. There's something I had to give. That is a bad dose to take. No, I can't change myself anymore.
The thought of death had begun to consume him on a grander scale in his later years. McQueen was seeing a therapist to be treated for severe anxiety and depression, and constantly complained of exhaustion. But the gathering melancholy of McQueen was almost trivial compared to the mental state of estranged muse Isabella Blow, who would go on to attempt suicide on no less than 3 occasions, passing away in 2007.
Izzy died proud. She died having achieved beyond her wildest dreams.
The fact that Izzy went was a huge blow to so many people, including Alexander. A huge blow.
Within 3 short years, McQueen experienced the devastating loss of the 2 women that supported him most, Isabella and his mother Joyce.
After my grandmother Joyce had passed away, he was in a really bad shape.
Lee was distraught. We were sitting in the living room at my dad's, and he didn't look himself at all, Lee. I mean, we was all taking my mum's passing bad, but I think we was all worried about Lee because obviously Mum and Lee idolised my mum.
The story of this renegade fashion designer is one built upon powerful moments made of courage, conviction, and an extraordinary vision. In May 2011, New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art's own Met Ball was perhaps one of the most holistic contributions to reveal the two. The posthumous show entitled Savage Beauty paid tribute to the life and life's work of the late Alexander McQueen. McQueen's own nephew, whom was working on one of Lee's final projects for a memorial, has unveiled recently a mural that coincides with a new documentary on the life of Alexander McQueen. A skull motif, one of McQueen's most popular talismans, was painted in London's Ebook Street in Shoreditch. As life went on, the demand for the continuation of his work was seamlessly handled by McQueen's right hand in the dressing room, long-term friend and prodigy Sarah Burton. In a new chapter, Burton, a master tailor herself, was handed the reins of the McQueen's empire with the freedom to steer its future and give acknowledgement to its past. Burton's own stardom catapulted when the label was selected to dress the Duchess Kate Middleton for her wedding to Prince William in 2011. The royals, along with the world's celebrity, continue to support the label under its new ambassador. Fashion figure Daphne Guinness, a close confidant and champion of McQueen himself, praised Burton's composure amidst the impossible task of filling McQueen's shoes, noting her skills honed during her years in Lee's company served to make the label stronger in his absence. Burton's 2014 collection for McQueen was a stripped-back presentation lacking the ornamentation of previous seasons in favour of a simplistic aesthetic. Each season continues to carve a new moment for McQueen, albeit in a much subtler fashion. The latest Resort 2019 collection was a celebration of Victorian heritage, heralding the hallmarks of McQueen's signature tailoring, exploring McQueen-esque dichotomies from the deeply feminine embroidered lace, white dresses, ruffles and cashmere that are eschewed to the structured leather corsets and signature harnesses. Alexander McQueen's death reflected the nature of his work, savage, romantic and steeped in tragedy. But McQueen was not without a sense of humour or perspective, leaving us to wonder what could have been.
Always been fascination with the Victorian view of death, where they almost, you know, when they used to take pictures of the dead, it's not about brushing under the carpet like we do today. It's about, you know, sort of like celebrating someone's life. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a very sad thing, about a melancholic thing, but I think it's a very romantic thing because it means an end of a cycle, and everything has an end. And I think the cycle of life is, you know, it is a positive thing because it gives room for new things to come behind you. So.
McQueen's death coincided with the first day of New York Fashion Week's fall collections and his own preparations to show in Paris. Perhaps his death was not untimely given McQueen's tumultuous run-ins with the industry, lost in all its inanity. On the eve of his beloved mother's funeral, McQueen, just 40 years young, gave in to a debilitating orgy of cocaine and sleeping pills, only to be found by morning, strung from the neck in his bedroom closet by his favourite belt. In his final moments, Lee scrawled a note in his beloved drawing book. "Take care of my dogs. Sorry. I love you. Lee."
If this amazing Alexander McQueen Renegades of Fashion story has moved or inspired you, you can now get the companion hardcover, softcover, or ebook directly from Fashion Industry Broadcasts with just one click via Amazon Books, delivered to your door anywhere in the world in just days. Each of our 11 Renegades editions in this collection is a lavish illustrated retrospective of the designer's life's work, lovingly told and displayed in over 400 pages in glorious colour. Hundreds of their runway collections are recorded in lavish detail. You can find the link to the Amazon sales page in the description box below. This essential Alexander McQueen Renegade Story coffee table book can be in the pride of place on your coffee table within the week.